Osio, hello. This is Fiber Grey Wolf from Native Voices, Turtle Island, and we are an Indigenous live stream show featuring Native Americans of all aspects. Today, I would like to welcome my honored friend, Monika Ponton Arrington. How are you, sweetheart?
Sio, Doiju, hello, how are you, Mabrike? Welcome. Thank you for
Oh,
having me here
welcome.
today.
You're one powerful woman. I'm proud to have you here.
Ha home, ha home. Thank you. Thank you.
Monica, I'm going to open up by asking you a few questions. Can you tell the audience what state you live in?
I live in LJ, Georgia. I live up in North Georgia mountains. I've been here for about 49 plus years, and I came here when I was 13 years old.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. It says here you were born in Atlanta, yes, and you have four grown children and seven grandchildren, and you are married to a gentleman that is from the Western Band Cherokee, federally recognized tribe. Can
Uh,
you go
yes,
ahead?
I was born in Orlando, Florida. I live right 2 hours above Atlanta. I have four children, seven grandchildren, and I'm married to what we call a mixed blood Cherokee. Some of his family members are enrolled with the Western Band in Cherokee, North Carolina, but his family is originally from Lookout Mountain and right above what we call Kuala. And yeah,
Koala
Kuala.
boundaries.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
yes. Um, what got you interested in researching your indigenous heritage?
Well, I was born in Orlando, but I grew up in an area called Miami Springs, Virginia Gardens, which is right outside Miami. And our coloring and the stories that my grandmother, my abuela, she is from her family, and my father and so forth are from the island of Borican, known as Puerto Rico. And I wanted to know because I have very straight hair, and I used to be a lot darker than I am now because when you age, you start lightening up. And I just started asking her questions, and she explained that we were known as Tainos, but we did not talk about it because Tainos were treated extremely horrendous when the Spanish came to the islands, the Caribbean islands. So when I was 13 and we moved up to the North Georgia mountains, we moved into a community that did not have Native people. But in the next state over, which was less than a half an hour, was North Carolina. And we found out that North Carolina has the Cherokee Reservation, known as the Kuala Boundary. And so we would go up there when I was growing up, and I just connected with them. And then I started doing more and more research about my people, the Tainos, and found out that there was hardly anything written about them. And then but my children, I had children, and so I would ask a lot of questions of my grandmother and my grandfather and my aunts and uncles. And when my children were born, some of them were dark like me, and some of them were not so dark. I have four. But they all have the qualities of both their father, who is of Cherokee descent, and of course, myself being of Taino descent. But I recognize myself and I am considered Taino. And then started doing more and more research and found out that we're still here. we still exist. And it became a movement. In the 90s, it became a movement, not only up in New York, but in Florida and in small other areas. But the biggest movement, of course, was in New York. And I connected with other Tainos in New York and in New Jersey. Then I found out there were Tainos everywhere. In Orlando, where I was born, and started my own movement, basically back in the 90s, in about 98. And basically, I was considered like the first Taino down here in the Southeast who actually says, "Hey, I'm Taino."
Mhm.
And it went from there. It went from there.
You said that you felt a little lost. Do you think the ancestors were calling out for you? You felt lost, like something was missing spiritually, and this helped in your quest to even more so to ask questions and to find out who you were?
Yes, very much so. When I was in my 30s, I was going through a very difficult time within my marriage, and I just started searching for like-minded people, and a lot of them were Cherokees, uh, carded and uncarded, um, and they treated me like one of them, basically.
Mm.
Been to ceremonies, been to stomps, but I was still lost because I needed to connect with my own people.
With your own
With
people.
my own people. And that started in 98 with Pedro Torres, who was with the Habanicos. He had a tribal group in Puerto Rican, known as Puerto Rico, and one in New Jersey. And then in 2000, um, he was doing things that I felt was not where I needed to be.
Mm.
So I kind of just went out on my own and just started talking to everyone.
Yeah.
In 2008, I went with another tribal group and became a liaison for the Southeast. And I traveled from Michigan down to Florida, all the way to Texas,
Wow.
um, to reach out to other Tainos. In 2015, I found out I had cancer,
Oh, yeah.
and I removed myself because of illness and went home. And to me, Borican, Puerto Rico, is home. And I visit with my relatives, and I visit ceremonial grounds and went through ceremony. And it's very hard to say this, but had a rebirth.
Mm.
Wash the old away. I needed to become new again. And so in 2016, I went to Borican for 2 weeks, and I took on a tribal name and worked with other caciques, and my family and several others appointed me their cacique. And a cacique is a chief in modern terms. And I was one of maybe 3 female caciques. There's one in, I believe, in Dominican Republic, and there is one in Borican, known as Puerto Rico, and myself. And my relatives and several others came to an eriato and made me a beautiful headdress and appointed me as
Wow.
one of the caciques, and you wear it like this, And this one is a traditional chief's headdress because it comes down very long on either side of your shoulders. And that was gifted to me. And there was 4 other caciques there who noted me also as a cacique, and went from there and started working with anyone and everyone who was like-minded and just wanted to know what it means to be Taino and wanted to search for those roots
Right, right.
and know the history. And our history was horrendous. At one time, they considered us extinct, and of course, we proved that wrong through DNA.
Right.
And again, it became such a big movement that we have in Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Florida, Georgia, and other areas, we have appointed by the people caciques.
Yes, that's the proper way. That's the way
Yes,
we do it too. Your people pick who they want to be leaders. No one else determines that, but your particular group of tribal members.
right. And so that's how it became. And working with the people, I was able to go to the United Nations. And at the United Nations, they recognized Tainos,
Mhm.
and from all the other states, which we know as countries all over the globe. And we have what they call interventions, where we say our people are facing these hardships and these hardships. And this is where the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People comes in. And this is a big platform for Indigenous people to know their rights of being Indigenous, not only to North America, South America, and Central America, but all over the globe, because there are Indigenous people all over the world. And I have, you know, my people were known as Taino people of the Southeast, and I just want to bring people together to understand, to sit and talk and get a feeling of what it means. And well, my abuela used to do that because our islands were inhabited by Spaniards,
Yes,
starting off with Christopher Columbus,
yes.
and he's the one that called us Indians first. So
Yeah.
the Tainos of Borican, Puerto Rico, are known as the first people,
Mhm.
for the simple reason we are a commonwealth of the United States. We don't have the same rights of federally recognized native, but we are more sovereign. And because we are only a commonwealth, we don't expect, a lot of us don't want anything from the United States government. We are our own people. We just saying we are here, and we prove them that we are here, the government. And we spread the word. If your
Right.
people are from the Caribbean, you most likely are Taino.
Yes. Isn't it true they found Taino hieroglyphics in Georgia that
Yes,
prove
they
that
did.
your people actually were here in more ways than one?
Yes, through trade. When you see, we have what they called a ceiba. It's a tree, and this tree gets very huge very quickly. And a lot of the canoas, known as canoes, were made out of these huge ceiba trees and could hold up to 150 people. And of course, they traded. They traded in the Yucatan. They traded among them from island to island, went all the way down through the Texas, all the way down the coast to Texas, and all the way up to North Carolina. And
Really?
yes, and about 25 years ago, I would say, they found a carving on this big, huge rock. This rock is so, I mean, it's humongous. And they found it at an area known as Sweetwater, which is in Lithia Springs. It's a park. And now it's in their museum, and it tells about the Tainos. So being a Taino and being head lady at many of the events that was held at Sweetwater, I was able to go there and get more information and work with Richard Thornton, who was the archaeologist, and able to clarify why it was a Taino piece.
Wow.
And but we do have stories of us trading with the Muskogee Creeks. I met
Really?
Yes, I met with at the time James Floyd was principal chief of the Muskogee Creek Nation, and we sat there and talked for several hours down at Okmulgee Mounds, which is right outside of Macon, Georgia. And he said he heard the same stories, that we were basically relatives.
Yes, I heard that too.
Yes. So this is, again, there's connections between all tribal nations in some form. We traded with the Mayans and the Aztecs, and our people. We found that our people came from Venezuela and Colombia, and went and inhabited the islands. And then you had the Caribs and the Arawaks. So these are all the people of the Caribbean, and we find that we're all related.
They're all related.
We're all related.
Now, I wanted to ask you about your name, Ponton, and the Venezuela connection.
Yes. Well, my great aunt, Juanita Vasquez, who lives right above Ponce, was able to trace our family all the way back to Venezuela. And it's very interesting. The paperwork I have is in Spanish. I don't write Spanish. Spanish. My Spanish is un poquito. Very,
No, poquito, mucho
very, very.
poquito, solamente.
So, but she told me, and she handed me all the paperwork about my family, the Gonzalez and the Pontons and the Riveras, and there's a fishing village in Aruba that is a fishing village called Ponton. And I found this out being at the United Nations. I was speaking in front of several people, and I had to introduce myself. And I met one of what they call one of the kings of Polynesia, and he had Taino blood in him too. But as we were talking, a young man comes up and kisses my hand, gets on his knees, kisses my hand, and tells me that there is this large fishing village in Aruba named after our family. So when I went to go visit my family, I said, "Who are we?" And she told me a beautiful story. Apparently, and as you know, Tainos did not have a written language.
Okay.
A lot of indigenous tribes do not have a written language.
Right.
But she explained that my fifth great grandfather owned a lot of land. There's still a city block in Ponce that my family still owns, not counting going up through Ponce up into the mountains. And she said my fifth grandfather had a daughter. He was known as a cacique. This is what they explained to me. And that my fourth grandfather was an orphan who came from Spain.
Oh, okay.
Now, this is just on one side of the family, not counting the other side. And he married my fourth great grandmother. Back then, because the Spanish still owned Puerto Rico, that when they got married, he gave all the land to my fourth grandfather. And because the children were of mixed, they were not Spanish, and the Spaniards had control of Puerto Rico, that he built a school and a medical dispensary, which are still there.
Wow.
The school is in total disrepair, but the medical dispensary is still right there on Innabon River, because Unknown and Innabon, Unknown comes into Innabon, and my family is up all through that area.
Wow,
And he
amazing.
built this medical dispensary so people would have medicine as well as schooling. And he's in the history books in Ponce, and he was well thought of, but he was an orphan from Spain who was sent to Puerto Rico, and he believed in the Taino people that were there. And understand that a lot of Taino people are of mixed descent. They
Yeah.
have Africans, because the Spaniards, when they would kill the men, because men, and even today, we ain't gonna be slaves to nobody.
Right.
And so they killed 90% of the men, and then they shipped in people from Africa, men from Africa, to hunt for the gold and to do the sugar cane and to do this and to do that. And that's where the mixture comes in. So when you see a poster, you will see a Spaniard, you will see a Black African, and then you will see a Taino. And the collaboration between the Tainos and the Black, trying to exist, to live. And because Puerto Rico is such a small island, but it's so mountainous, that a lot of them were able to hide.
Yeah.
Just like they did in Cuba and in some areas of Dominican Republic, known as Vizcaya.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the history that we, and we tried to explain, I identify 100% as Taino.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I am of mixed descent.
Right.
But
so many of us are.
Right. So I look at myself as, when somebody says, well, what's your tribe? I'm Taino.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Taino. I don't say but or what. I just say I'm Taino. I identify as a Taino.
Right, right. Getting back to what you said about them trading and coming up so far, I have a good friend. Many people have heard of him, Evan Pritchard, Professor Evan Pritchard. He writes many books, and he taught me that the Tainos came to New York, Classen Point, the Soundview area. They would actually come up and trade with the Savinoy tribes of the Wappinger Confederacy, and also the Lenape people. And they would trade for wampum. So it just shows you how fast and far they went.
Yes.
It's amazing. And the abuse that your people suffered under the Spanish government, Governor Ponce de Leon, he was a blip, he caused so much problems that even the said enemies of the Taino, the Caribs, they joined them together, Taino and Carib, to try to fight the abuse. Enemies became friends, even though they were defeated in those battles, they put up a good struggle. And when I went to Puerto Rico in the 80s, the Spanish still had a lot of control. I remember riding through the town and Bayamon and old San Juan, and seeing Spanish only allowed here in clubs. And in the 80s was far back, but then again, compared to the ancient history of the abuse, this was recent, and it just shows you the power that they had over your island. Thanks to Christopher Columbus. You know, so it's amazing. And I wanted to ask you about your attending the Native Wellness Institute.
That's a program that works with Indigenous people. I received a very small scholarship, and I was able to go and understand a little bit more of the trauma, the generational trauma that seems to happen among Native people. And it boils down to several. You can't just pinpoint one thing. But I found that generational trauma still continues today, in many forms. But I was able to work with a what we call a singer, a medicine man by the name of Rex Harvey. But I was able to work with several Hawaiians who came to also to take the classes. And we had Apaches, Comanches, Coeur d'Alenes. We had Onondagos, Oneidas, and the similarities of the generational trauma, everything from alcohol abuse, drug abuse, physical, mental, psychological, spiritual abuse, not allowed to practice their spirituality, do their own ceremonies. But the fact that, as one time my grandmother put to me, shh, you don't tell them you're Indian.
Mm.
And this comes from my grandmother. And she told me stories of what happened, that if you were caught as a Taino. But the Wellness Institute, Native Wellness Institute, still continues today. A lot of us still go to catch up on classes, and we do go to conferences and so forth. But you got firsthand experiences, because you would work with someone else and there was triggers.
Oh,
How
okay.
you would react to those triggers, so you would understand what type of generational trauma went on within that family or in that tribe. I put it this way: I met several Lakotas and Comanches and Apaches, and people don't seem to understand. These are nomadic people.
Yes,
They are used to moving around. They
yes,
didn't
yes,
live in ukeyekes,
yes,
villages, or towns like the Cherokees did.
yes.
They are used to moving to follow the buffalo,
Right, right.
and the antelope and so forth.
Yes.
And when in the 1800s, when the government went out there and took their land and killed buffaloes and put them on these reservations and then expect them to farm and to live,
Mm,
again, generational trauma. So what did they have?
yes. Forcing them to go against the grain.
Going against the grain, but then they no longer could to be able to hunt. They were no longer able to do their ceremonies. I mean, it took so many years. It took till 2011 for the
Wow,
United States to sign off on the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples.
wow,
And there was 4 countries that didn't sign until 2011.
wow,
And that was Australia, Canada, the United States, and New Zealand. And that's because they had the largest population of Indigenous peoples.
right. And we know what's happening with Canada right now.
Exactly. Exactly. And the Declaration of Rights is a guideline,
yes,
for Indigenous people, not only for their own rights, but it counts for civil rights as well as human rights. And people seem to forget that the Indigenous people of Turtle Island, we're still here.
it's
We
still
have
very
never
much
left.
here.
We're still
We're
here.
not going anywhere.
Right. And we're not something else. We're not something else. We are people.
We are
And
definitely
people seem to
people.
forget that. Yeah.
Now, when you were a part of the Wellness Institute, did you apply natural spirituality type of techniques? Was that done?
Yes. Rex Harvey, again, was a person of medicine. He was a singer from the Navajo Reservation. And I worked with him very closely, along with two of my Hawaiian sisters. And these were Indigenous Hawaiians. And the songs was part of that teaching. The singing, the healing of the songs, the healing of the using your hands, using certain herbs and certain medicines.
Mm,
Out west, a lot of people we use tabanuco, which weeps from a tree at the full moon. It's a tree that actually weeps. Out west,
really?
they use sage, and they use different other items. Um, Palo Santos is used with some tribes. Uh, Sweetgrass, cornmeal. Um, we use water. Water is a wonderful healing element, especially if you come from the coast or you come from towns like the Cherokees. They have water source, and they use water as part of their ceremonies.
Hmm.
Out west, they use the sweat lodge.
Hmm.
So we learned and we respect each other's ways, but we were able to understand what is used. We didn't take their ways and make it ours. That is the ways of those people.
Right.
Now I've been invited to sweat lodges. I've been invited to
Mm-mm.
different types of ceremonies, stomps, you name it. I've been invited. And, there was times that I respectfully stood back and watched and kept it to myself. And other times I joined in, but I never claimed it as my own because it was not from my people. And I believe strongly that it's good to work within your people's ways of doing things. I feel very strongly. That's just for me. But I did learn the different ways of different tribes. And it's a beautiful thing. It is absolutely a beautiful thing.
Now, do any of the Taino people that you know still worship many gods because you had more than one, or is it one now, like modern times?
Well, and see, that's a misunderstanding. Again, I think it's a misconception. We have
Yes,
Atabe, which is Mother Earth, and we have Yokahu, who is the creator.
it's the creator.
And then we had the two twins, Thunder and Lightning. And if you ask me to say it in Taino, I will have to say I can't do it.
Not asking, not asking.
But we also had we there's no difference between angels and spirits
Mm.
when you really get down to it. The most famous, and I have it on my shoulder.
Yeah,
Is
yes, I
a
was going to ask you
yeah,
about that and around your neck too.
yeah. Um, it's a hibiscus with a little tiny coquille,
Oh,
and
Koki,
then a
yeah.
coquille, and it's just like that, coquille, coquille, coquille. And it was a song for us. And there are stories how the frog came to be human. The little coquille became human and vice versa. It also talks about the golden pumpkin, which was a gourd that lit the water that made the island, and how all
Wow.
the fishes and the plants and everything came out. These are different stories, but the bottom line is, if you listen to the stories of whether it's the Cherokees, the Lakotas, they all connected
Yes.
to what is going on. So we have Mother Earth, we have Yokohu, and we do have thunder and lightning, which are the twins, and then we have Huracan, who's the hurricane, and we call these are the spirits. And
Oh,
yes,
okay.
guys, please, go by us.
Yeah.
We didn't, we didn't. We would pray that they would, would move away. But we knew that there was one greater being, and that without Atabe, Mother Earth, we would not exist.
Wow. That's amazing. Now, does Koki have any religious significance?
Not
Or
that
is
I know. I've never seen any religious significance. It's a song. I mean, now they have them in Hawaii because a lot of our people went to Hawaii because of the pineapple and the sugar cane.
wow, amazing.
Yeah, they're considered an invasive species. And what happened was, when the people from our island were going to Hawaii, they took the coquille with them. They were taking a little
Really?
piece of home with them, and the sound of a coquille. And if you just type in coquille on the internet and listen to what the sound it makes, it's a little golden frog, which is what I have on my shoulder, a little tiny golden frog. And it's just a beautiful sound. We had petroglyphs. We have the snail, the snake, the mountains, the hurricane, the symbol for water. These were things that we did have, and we respected. There was a great deal of respect that I think Native people have. We didn't just cut a tree down just because it was there. If we cut a tree down, it's because it was needed. And if it was needed, then of course, we would offer, prayers. We're cutting you down. Thank you for giving us the shelter that we need. Same way that if you took an animal's life, that animal's given his life up or her life up for you to eat. And you're thanking them for doing this. And I think what has happened is there's no more balance between
Mm.
us and Mother Earth. And a lot of us are trying to get back that balance. And I think, and I say a lot of us, I mean, Indigenous people are trying to get that balance back.
Yes. I have some questions over here from viewers. Gary asked, did the Taino trade with the Powhatan? Do you know, in Virginia?
I believe so, because they did go up the coast. I know is that they've gone as far as South Carolina and North Carolina, but there is records showing that they went as far as New York. So I would assume that they would have traded with the Powhatans too.
Okay. The next question is, my mom's paternal line is from Venezuela as well as yours.
That's awesome.
And the next question is, Evan Pritchard wrote a good book, Native New Yorkers.
Yes, there's a lot of Tainos in New York because that's where they came to from the ships back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and 50s, and even today.
Okay, the next question is, statement is, my GED match DNA results show Puerto Rico and Dominican DNA.
Wow.
So I guess they're trying to connect the Taino heritage there. And the next one is, that's great. And someone else wrote, yes, Atabe is your Taino god. So they're familiar with that as well. Um, Monica, I wanted to ask you about Project Access.
Oh, Project Access.
Yes.
Project, that's how I got to start with the UN. It was run by Ms. Pamela Kraft, who believed that the indigenous people need to have a voice at the United Nations. And I had the honor to go 2 years to Project Access. Under Project Access, which allows indigenous people, you have to apply to Project Access, and they do a complete background check, Homeland Security background check, it felt like. And then they give you a scholarship.
Mm,
And then you learn how to be a delegate to the United Nations on indigenous issues.
mm,
And 2 years in a row, I went. Usually, most don't only go 1 year. I was able to go 2 years for the simple reason is I was a lot older. I would say 90% of the people. I was a lot older. These Project Access usually works with young people just starting out in their 20s. And there was well, 1 year there was two of us in our 50s, and everybody else was in their either 40 and below, 20s, mostly in their 20s. And so for 2 years, Project Access, I learned how to write a statement, because you only get 3 minutes to write a statement to speak in front of the United Nations. They have what they call works, methods, and you have to develop what you are speaking on concerning indigenous people,
mm,
whether their civil rights are being taken, social development, and how to how to do a resolution, how to resolve the issues that are facing these indigenous people, or even your own people, and bring awareness to the rest of the world of what is going on. And Bangladesh, one of my adopted daughters is from Bangladesh. And we worked very strongly. And there was a group of us women that became a powerhouse. Two of us was from our families were from Borican, Puerto Rico. One was from Bangladesh. One was from Pennsylvania. Another one was from Nepal, and another one was from Australia, and one was from Mexico. And we became a powerhouse, and we all came back the second year. All of us did. And to find these women to work together and to have their intervention accepted by the United Nations, and to get other nations to back you up while you read this intervention and have your intervention accepted and looked at and be put into the books, was a great accomplishment among all of us. And we spoke about the hurricane that happened that devastated Puerto Rico. We spoke
yes.
about what happened to Nepal with the earthquake the first year
Yes.
in 2015, Mount Everest in the big huge earthquake, and some of the people that we were working with were from Nepal, and
Mm,
they couldn't get a hold of relatives. So all these things, you come to realize that indigenous people that are around the world care. They care, but
mm,
we're not being heard. And we need to be heard. And with all due respect, policy is the only way to be heard. I was told
right,
that once
right.
by
How
a friend.
how is Puerto Rico treating the Tainos now, as well as the people of Puerto Rico with that horrible hurricane? How are you
Well,
being treated?
The island still has a lot of areas that are still devastated. Um, we had several Tainos who were part of electricity power that went to Puerto Rico. Water was the biggest issue because a lot of the smaller towns were cut off because of mudslides and collapse. Roads were washed away, bridges were washed out. It's still deeper in the mountains. They're still recovering. When I was
Wow.
there, and see, I was there in 2016, right before the hurricane hit.
Wow.
I was there 2 weeks. The week I left, the very following week is when that hurricane hit, Maria,
Yeah.
and we had to reach. We tried to reach our cousins, our aunts, our uncles, our mothers, our fathers, our grandmothers. And we find that the people of Puerto Rico, especially on the south side of the island, from the mountains south, were the most devastated. And we find how resilient our people are. And that the treatment of Tainos in general has improved a great deal. We have a voice. We just need a bigger voice.
Is there a Taino museum or anything there?
There's several. There's one in Hayuya, and there's one in Tebez, which is right above Ponce, and Hayuya is above Ponce also, but it's way up in the mountains. And there's a couple of others that they try to close down, but the Taino people came together and have restored and are still restoring. The caves that are up in the mountains are being protected now from looters. The pottery, the bones. They were trying to build a new waterway, and they found a very huge Yukayeke village, and on the outside of Ponce, on the east side of Ponce, and they had to stop building this waterway because the village was right there, and it was such a beautiful, with huge statues. And but if you're on the south side of the island, you will see more Tainos than you will on the north side. The Spanish took over San Juan and so forth. But if you come on the south side of the island, if you cross that mountain.
Well, I hope my audience excuses me if they see my head put down or I'm looking that way. I'm trying to read the comments and the questions being answered. And Monika has such an extensive biography. It's just amazing. USA Today says Monika Ponton Arrington is committed to preserving, restoring the knowledge and spirituality of the Taino people. It's just awesome what you're doing.
No, thank you.
It's just amazing. And I wanted to ask you your contribution to doing things with the Cherokee Nation, and please explain to the audience which Cherokee Nation it is that you do things with.
Well, I haven't done anything recently. It's been several years because of my cancer and so forth. But I was working with what they call the Interfaith Peace Building Initiative to the United Nations. And I was appointed the Indigenous ambassador. And,
Oh,
and they had what they call the I Change Nation and the Golden Rule. And it was my responsibility, job, whatever, how you ever wanted to put it, to nominate Indigenous leaders that and people who spoke. And so I went to Oklahoma oh my gosh, back in 2014, I believe it was, and presented Principal Chief Bill John Baker, the I Changed Nation Award, a plaque and a medal, and then to Donnie Soleil, Tommy Wildcat, and Ryan Mackey, with awards through the Golden Rule Award, and these awards and these medals says they are making a difference within their own communities. I've worked with several other nations. I spoke in front of the Cherokee Eastern Band, EBCI, Eastern Band of Cherokee People, on behalf of New Echota, which was the Cherokee capital before the removal. I was on their board, and I wanted to invite and get them to understand that New Echota wants the people to come back home. So in 2018, we had what we call a homecoming for the Cherokee people. And we invited all 3 principal chiefs from Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, United Kituah Band, and Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma, as well as James Floyd from the Muskogee Creek, because they also were forced on this trail to Oklahoma. And we invited them to come back home. And it was for them that, even though the Trail of Tears started here in the state of Georgia, and Georgia is still not quite there yet, and I'm still working to get them to understand that Indigenous people are here in Georgia no matter what.
Right.
This was for them. They were forced out of their homes, off their land. Their homes,
right in Georgia.
Yeah, their homes were burned, and it was a way to try to bring people together to understand. And I feel at times that the government doesn't see who we are and what we are about. And it is a struggle. To this day, it's still a struggle. My friend Terry, who is with Navajo Nation, I don't want to say his last name because he probably might not like it. But he works with the Navajo, and he works with the city, in New Mexico, and he works with the state, and he also goes to the United Nations on Indigenous issues. And my Hawaiian sisters, there's so many of us that we're each trying to do what we can for the people. And we came to the conclusion that the only way to make a change is by policy. By policy. Marching doesn't do it. Marching doesn't do it.
No.
You have to change policy. That's the only way to do it.
That's the only way. What would you like to see or do in the future, Monika, for these causes?
Well, my first goal is to get Georgia to have a Indian Affairs Commission as a separate entity, not under the Department of Natural Resources.
Mm-hmm.
All they do is say, oh yeah, that's a burial site. Let's take the bones and let's take them to Cherokee Nation or to Eastern Band. The bones were found here in Georgia.
Yes.
They belong back. You need to return them back to where they belong, not ship them. That's not right.
Right.
So many different Indigenous people now moving to Georgia.
Yeah.
That we need to have Indian Affairs Commission that will understand that maybe this person who came from the Onondagas or the United or the Coeur d'Alenes or from out west, Apache Comanche, that they can go to the Indian Center and they can sit down and they can look for a job, they can look for a place to live, they can get references and referrals for housing and so forth. It's never
Right.
going to be a free ride.
Right.
It's
Right.
never a free ride, but
Right.
we need something that our people can go to.
Right. They
We
come
have
to the
community centers
mounds,
for
and
everyone
we
else.
need more than tourists coming to the mounds in
Exactly.
Macon.
Exactly. We have enough community centers for this race of people and these people, but we don't have one here for the indigenous people.
Right. Now,
Yeah.
I heard that you honored Harriet Tubman.
Uh, I went out there. And yes, that was kind of private, but yes, very much.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And young lady, you are a first responder. And can you tell me a little bit about you wear so many hats? And I
Well,
want to know about your choker around your neck as well. And then I'll let you go.
okay. This is called my mind just went blank, but caciques wear this. It is the sun, and it's called guanilla. That's what it's called. And this was made for me by Steve Blackhawk. And then I have my little coquille. I always wear made with bamboo. But I've always wanted to be a nurse when I was growing
Mm.
up, and started going to nursing school 3 different times. And each time I was told no. Each time something happened. And so I said, well, I have 4 children. I have a big family. I have 3 sisters and a brother and tons of cousins, aunts, and uncles. So I decided to take the first responders course. And with my knowledge of already of nursing and how to do shots and how to take blood pressure and all that sort of stuff. And today we witnessed a horrible accident. And my daughter was with me, and my granddaughter was in her car seat. And I put it into park right away, and I called 911. My daughter, I said, get him out, because the car was smoking. They were able to get out. But they were limp. A lot of one kid looked like he'd just been beaten up.
Oh, poor
And
thing.
so we helped him over to the side of the road, and I started checking pulses, dilated eyes, checking for wounds. The little boy, the one who was in the back seat, his leg got banged up pretty bad. The mom looked
Oh,
more in shock than anything. But I
oh,
know by being in an accident in the front seat, and then you're the driver, that your legs are the ones that you have to really worry about.
yes.
And the oldest boy, who was in the passenger seat in the front, got hit with the airbag full force, face and side of his head. And if you've ever been hit by an airbag, they can do a lot of damage. They still can do a lot
Yes,
of
people
damage.
have gotten killed.
Yeah. And so his stomach was starting to bruise up, and he said he
Oh,
was hearing ringing in his ears. So I checked his eyes. They were slightly dilated. And I told him, I said, can you breathe? Let me, and I was taking his pulse. So all 3 of them, they were okay until, the ambulance came. The oldest one had to be put on the stretcher because of we were worried about his chest area.
oh my
I
goodness.
didn't know if his ribs were broken because of the force of the impact. Um, a big old truck, one of those old fashioned Ford trucks that have the flatbed that you can tow vehicles on. Anyway, the truck wasn't damaged, but that car was totaled. There was no front to it, no more. It was gone. It was completely gone, and all the airbags had been deployed.
Oh my goodness.
So we had to stay there and had to give our report to Georgia State Patrol and to the Sheriff's Department and the ambulances and fire trucks and everything. And then this big, huge Great Pyrenees came out of nowhere. Big white Great Pyrenees came out of nowhere. And it was just so interesting because he looked so concerned for the people, because he kept on, checking them out. And he was still there up until we finally got a hold of the owner, because he was wearing a dog tag. And the owner came to get him. But he stayed right there and would not leave at all. And so all that, it was a savings grace. I look at it that the fact that nobody got killed.
Yes.
And being the oldest of 5 kids and having 4 children myself, and it's in my nature to.
Yeah.
It's in my nature.
I read that you were a very caring spirit,
Thank you.
I'm so glad to have had you today, and hopefully we can do something again soon. And I love you. You're awesome. Keep up the great work. So, ladies and gentlemen, my audience, once again, you were presented with a great spirit, Cacique, Dr. PhD, Monika Ponton Arrington. And we thank you so much for sharing your story and your accomplishments with us, and what you may bring to help us in the future.
I hope to keep doing what I do and just be a voice, and hope other voices will join in and understand that policy is where we have to go to make a difference.
All right, everyone. This is Firebird Grey Wolf signing off from Native Voices Turtle Island. Everyone, bye. Bye, sweetie. Bye.
Ha home.
Aho.